The world isn't deceiving you. It's testing you. And here's why. You see some men rise in business, dominate, carve out empires, while others, just as talented, just as driven, vanish into the background. Why? Why do certain individuals effortlessly bend the boardroom to their will, commanding attention, respect, and resources, while others scrabble for mere scraps of recognition? It's not luck. It's not simply raw talent. It's psychology. The kind of raw, unfiltered truth that Machiavelli grasped centuries ago, a truth he laid bare in a world far more brutal, yet eerily similar to our own. Before modern management theories, before brand consultants, before the very concept of networking even existed, he understood that human nature, its deep-seated desires and fears, not just strategic planning, ultimately dictates who ascends and who crumbles. Every empire, whether political or corporate, rests upon the same fragile, volatile psychology of power. Understand this and engrave it in your mind. The business world is not a marketplace of equals. It is a battlefield, expertly disguised by polished facades and polite smiles. Every handshake, every signed deal, every strategic partnership hides an invisible war, a relentless struggle for influence, for critical information, and ultimately for absolute control. And in that relentless, silent war, Machiavelli's principles are not dusty relics of a bygone era. They are still the most dangerous, most effective manuals for survival and conquest. Strip away the corporate jargon, the expensive suits, and the comfortable illusions, and you'll find that business success boils down to one undeniable truth. Those who understand the mind, those who truly master its hidden levers, are the ones who command the entire game. And that, precisely, is what Machiavelli mastered, the cold, unyielding psychology of advantage. Most people fail in business not because they lack skill, but because they lack a brutal, clear strategy. They play fair, and playing fair in this game often leaves you broke, while those who quietly, decisively bend the rules rise to absolute power. This isn't about ethics, it's about reality. In this deep dive, we're tearing open how Machiavellian psychology still governs modern success, how understanding the dynamics of perception, the subtle art of manipulation, the iron grip of necessity, and the primal force of fear can literally make or break your entire empire. By the time we're done, you'll know exactly why the smartest executives never play fair. They play human nature. They weaponize its predictable patterns. If you're ready to confront how ancient cunning built the foundations of modern empires and how it continues to shape them, then stay until the very end. This isn't theoretical. It's a blueprint. You're going to understand why the default path, the good path, often leads to irrelevance. More importantly, you'll see how Machiavelli's psychological principles can forge your ambition into a potent weapon of influence, making you not just successful, but untouchable in the ruthless game of global business. Comment below right now. I play the game with my eyes open. Let's begin. What if the ultimate playbook for corporate giants, for the game-changing CEOs who reshape industries, wasn't dreamed up in some Ivy League lecture hall at Harvard or Stanford? What if it was scribbled down, painstakingly, by an exiled politician in 16th century Italy, a man stripped of everything but his intellect and his observations? For 500 years, Niccolo Machiavelli's The Prince has been that secret manual, whispered among those who recognize that power, at its core, is nothing less than a high-stakes game. Written around 1513, this wasn't some lofty philosophical text about how the world should operate, how leaders should behave. No, it was a brutally honest, almost surgical guide on how power is actually won, how it's wielded, and how it's fiercely held onto in the unpredictable, often savage, real world. Machiavelli, a diplomat from Florence, penned it after being abruptly booted from political life, a personal crisis that sharpened his observations into cold, hard insights. He was, in essence, trying to regain the good graces of the ruling Medici family, offering them a definitive roadmap for consolidating and maintaining power during deeply chaotic, turbulent times. Ever since its controversial release, his name has become synonymous with cunning, with manipulation, with the unforgiving pursuit of victory at all costs. The very word Machiavellian literally means scheming, duplicitous, and acting in bad faith. It conjures images of ruthless ambition and ethical compromise. But what if we've been reading him all wrong? What if, beneath that notoriously controversial surface, Machiavelli's work isn't about being inherently evil, but about understanding the uncomfortable, inconvenient, and often hidden truths of human psychology, truths that most refuse to acknowledge? And what if those 500-year-old ideas are the real, unspoken reason why some companies utterly dominate their markets, crushing all competition, while others, seemingly viable, simply die out, forgotten? In this exploration, we're dissecting 7 core psychological principles drawn directly from that ancient playbook, principles that are still secretly, profoundly shaping today's modern business landscape. We'll expose how visionaries, from the relentless perfectionism of Steve Jobs to the calculated expansion of Jeff Bezos, have, whether they knew it or not, consciously or unconsciously, deployed these exact strategies to forge their colossal empires. This isn't about transforming you into a cartoonish tyrant in the corner office. This is about understanding the raw, unfiltered psychology of power, the kind of brutal reality they deliberately don't teach you in any business school curriculum because it's simply too unsettling. It's about seeing the game for what it truly is. Principle 1. The cold truth of command. Better to be feared or loved. Let's start with Machiavelli's most infamous and perhaps most profoundly misunderstood piece of advice. It is much safer to be feared than loved if you cannot be both. At first glance, this sounds like a chilling green light for tyranny, an endorsement of ruling with an iron fist, through pure intimidation. But the psychological reality is far more nuanced, far more complex, and terrifyingly relevant in any modern corporate environment. Machiavelli wasn't advocating for cruelty's sake. He was making a cold, hard, dispassionate assessment of fundamental human nature. Love, he observed, is based on a sense of obligation, a fragile bond that people, being inherently fickle and self-interested, will break whenever it's convenient for them, whenever their personal calculus shifts. Fear, on the other hand, is held firmly in place by a visceral dread of punishment, a force that, he noted, never fails to compel obedience and compliance. In the unforgiving world of business, this means a leader who is only loved is, in essence, weak. Sure, warmth and camaraderie can foster a pleasant atmosphere, but they can also breed a dangerous lack of discipline, a softness that permits underperformance. A boss desperate to be liked will habitually duck the hard decisions, prioritizing their fleeting popularity over the long-term health and survival of the company. They will sacrifice strategic imperative for personal comfort, a guaranteed path to corporate decline. The psychological core here isn't about terror. It's about a profound, unwavering respect, backed by consequences. Fear, in the Machiavellian sense, means establishing clear, non-negotiable authority and predictable consequences for failure to meet expectations. It's the deep understanding that mediocrity or underperformance will simply not be tolerated, and that the leader possesses the courage, the virtu, to consistently enforce those standards even when it's uncomfortable or unpopular. Surprisingly, modern research often corroborates this ancient insight. A 2016 study, for example, found that good leadership, often interpreted as being liked and supportive, doesn't necessarily reduce employee turnover. Why? because good bosses develop their employees so well that they become prime candidates for better-paying jobs with more responsibility elsewhere, a testament to their growth, but not necessarily their loyalty. This suggests that respect, clear boundaries, and high expectations, consistently applied, can be far more powerful tools for long-term organizational health than merely being likable. But, and this is a colossal but, Machiavelli adds a critical, almost compassionate warning. A leader, he stresses, must above all avoid being hated. He states that a ruler must never seize property or bring dishonor on his people, because that's precisely when fear curdles into virulent contempt, a far more dangerous emotion. In the cutthroat corporate world, this means you can be demanding, you can set impossibly high standards, but you absolutely must be perceived as fair. You cannot be arbitrary, capricious, or hypocritical. A truly feared leader who is also respected, who is seen as just and consistent, can drive a team to achieve truly amazing, even impossible things. A leader who is merely hated, however, just breeds insidious resentment, quiet sabotage, and eventual, inevitable collapse. Consider the legendary Steve Jobs. He was notoriously difficult, relentlessly demanding. He was known for his withering critiques, for yelling at employees, for bluntly calling their work shit, and for pushing for a level of perfection that drove people to their absolute psychological limits. By almost all accounts, he was a leader to be feared in the classical sense. So why did he inspire such intense loyalty? Why did he build the most valuable company in the world? Because his ferocity was always, unambiguously, in service of a clear, brilliant, often revolutionary vision. Employees might have dreaded his temper, but they universally respected his genius, his unerring instinct for design and innovation. The fear wasn't personal. It was about the profound dread of failing the incredibly high standards he set, not just for them, but for himself. He walked that razor's edge, proving that when used correctly, fear, or perhaps we should reframe it as profound, earned respect, is a far stronger, more enduring tool for achieving greatness than mere affection alone. Principle 2. The duality of corporate strategy, the lion and the fox. Machiavelli offered a powerful, enduring metaphor for leadership, one that remains a psychological blueprint for success in the brutal world of business. A ruler, he wrote, must be both a lion and a fox. He elaborated. The lion cannot defend himself from snares, and the fox cannot defend itself from wolves. Therefore, it is necessary to be a fox to discover the snares and a lion to terrify the wolves. This isn't just slick rhetoric, it's a strategic imperative. The lion embodies strength, courage, and raw, unadulterated brute force. This is the leader who isn't afraid to take decisive charge, to make audacious, huge bets, and to crush existential threats head-on with overwhelming power. In business, that's the CEO who orchestrates a hostile takeover, who drops a truly disruptive product that reshapes an entire market, or who makes the painful, unpopular call to radically restructure the company, shedding entire divisions, to ensure its survival. It is the manifestation of raw, unyielding power. Think of Microsoft in the 1990 seconds under Bill Gates. It operated as a lion, leveraging its unparalleled market dominance to aggressively muscle out competitors, making Windows the undeniable king of the computing world. The lion's power resides in its directness, its unblinking resolve, but strength, by itself, is a dangerous liability. A lion, Machiavelli pointed out, for all its power, can stumble blindly into a trap, become ensnared by unseen forces. That's precisely where the fox comes in. The fox represents cunning, intricate strategy, and the ability to perceive the bigger picture, to read between the lines. The fox is the leader who can expertly navigate the treacherous political currents in the boardroom, who uses intelligence and sometimes a calculated degree of deception or misdirection to outsmart rivals to gain an asymmetric advantage. The fox doesn't rely on brute force. It uses unparalleled cleverness. It's the strategist who pulls off a surprise partnership that blindsides the competition, the negotiator who extracts an incredible deal by intimately knowing the other side's hidden weaknesses and vulnerabilities, or the master marketer who subtly, almost imperceptibly, shapes public perception to favor their product or narrative. A leader who is only a lion will, inevitably, get outsmarted. They will fall prey to the unseen traps of market shifts, evolving consumer behaviors, or internal political machinations they never saw coming. On the other hand, a leader who is only a fox can be too clever for their own good, constantly devising brilliant schemes but lacking the raw power, the decisive will, to actually execute on their intricate plans. The true genius lies in being able to embody both. It's knowing precisely when to unleash a resounding roar and when to quietly, patiently set a trap, waiting for the opportune moment. Steve Jobs is, once again, the perfect embodiment of this duality. He was a lion when he famously declared thermonuclear war on Google's Android, a raw, emotional display of aggressive force. Yet, he was also a masterful fox. His legendary reality distortion field was a sly, almost hypnotic form of manipulation, an uncanny ability to convince everyone around him to believe in his vision, to achieve the seemingly impossible, even when all logic dictated otherwise. That was the fox's art of persuasion, the subtle bending of minds. Or observe Amazon. The company acts like a lion when it bulldozes into a new market, using its massive scale and financial might to sell at a loss, driving out smaller, independent competitors with sheer economic force. But it's also an incredibly sophisticated fox. Its advanced algorithms, which predict your purchasing desires with chilling accuracy, are a form of cunning that subtly influences your decisions, guiding you down specific consumption paths. Furthermore, its audacious move into cloud computing with AWS was a brilliant, fox-like play that created an entirely new, dominant business out of an opportunity no one else truly saw or understood, diversifying its revenue streams and locking in critical infrastructure. The psychological lesson is clear. You must actively cultivate this duality, develop the courage and decisive power of the lion, but also the strategic intelligence, the foresight, and the adaptability of the fox. The best leaders aren't confined to one mode or the other. They know precisely when to switch, when to blend these two powerful archetypes as circumstances demand, always maintaining an edge. Principle 3. Virtù, the relentless defeat of fortune. One of the most powerful, yet often misunderstood, psychological ideas in Machiavelli's work is virtù. Now, this isn't virtue in the modern sense of being a good, moral person. For Machiavelli, virtù is a potent, complex mix of ambition, decisive action, unwavering courage, and the raw, unbending will to impose oneself on the world, to make one's mark, regardless of obstacles. It's about being the absolute master of your own destiny, instead of a passive, helpless victim of fate, which he termed fortuna, or fortune. Machiavelli believed that fortuna controls about half of our lives, the unpredictable elements, the external shocks. But, crucially, she leaves the other half for us to control, to shape, to dominate. That's where virtù comes in. He vividly described fortuna as a raging river. When it floods, it wipes out everything in its path, indiscriminately. But a leader possessing virtù doesn't simply pray for the flood to recede. They spend the quiet times, the periods of calm, diligently building dams, constructing levees, fortifying their position, meticulously preparing for the inevitable deluge. In the cutthroat world of business, that flood represents market crashes, the sudden emergence of disruptive technologies, or a global pandemic that reshapes entire industries overnight. A company operating without virtue will inevitably get washed away, becoming just another casualty of circumstance. A company infused with virtue, however, possesses the foresight, the strategic resilience, to not only survive the disaster but to channel its chaotic power, to redirect its force for its own audacious gain. This is all about cultivating an intensely proactive, almost aggressive mindset. Leaders brimming with virtue don't passively wait for things to happen to them. They make things happen. They are, as Machiavelli starkly put it, adventurers rather than cautious, because fortune is a woman, and to master her you have to be bold, even violent. In business, this translates to a philosophy of embracing calculated, smart risks and never, ever standing still. Stagnation isn't just a threat. Stagnation is death. Consider the classic, now infamous, story of Blockbuster versus Netflix. Blockbuster was a behemoth, a monstrous company that dominated its era, but it ultimately had no virtù. It became complacent, fat and happy with its brick-and-mortar stores and lucrative late fees. When the internet unleashed the flooding river of digital streaming, Blockbuster saw it coming, but was too slow, too indecisive, too comfortable. It became a prime victim of fortuna. Netflix, on the other hand, is the quintessential poster child for virtù. Its very first move, DVD by mail, was a direct, calculated attack on Blockbuster's business model. But the founders didn't stop there. They possessed the foresight, the crucial virtù, to see that streaming was the inevitable future. They began constructing those digital dams, laying the groundwork long before the flood truly hit. Then, they made a bold, seemingly crazy move. They intentionally cannibalized their own highly successful DVD business to go all in on streaming, a move of audacious self-disruption. When the streaming market became crowded, they demonstrated virtù again, pivoting into a full-blown content production studio, pouring billions into original content. At every critical juncture, Netflix has shaped its circumstances, forcing them to bend to its will instead of being shaped by them. Amazon is another master of virtù. Jeff Bezos has always run the company with an unblinking eye on the distant future, constantly adapting, constantly evolving. From an online bookstore to an everything store, to a dominant cloud computing giant, to a smart home powerhouse, each strategic move was an act of profound virtù, seizing an opportunity and imposing its will on the entire industry. The psychological lesson is indelible. Success is not a destination. It's a relentless, constant process of decisive, strategic action. Leaders must cultivate deep resilience, an almost primal drive, and an undeniable bias for bold, often unpopular decisions. Because in today's hyper-volatile world, virtù isn't just an advantage, it's an absolute requirement for mere survival. Principle 4. Conquering the yes-man culture. The poison of flattery. Machiavelli, a sharp and unforgiving observer of human behavior, knew that one of the deadliest, most insidious threats to any leader, any powerful entity, is a subtle one: flatterers. He wrote with chilling precision, "There is no other way of guarding oneself from flatterers except by letting men understand that, to tell you the truth, does not offend you." This statement is a masterclass in organizational psychology, striking directly at the heart of the yes-man culture that has sunk countless companies, crumbled once mighty empires, and left ambitious leaders utterly blind. A leader surrounded by sycophants is a leader living in a dangerous fantasy world of their own making. Flatterers will tell you what you desperately want to hear, never what you brutally need to hear. They act as a corrosive filter, diligently sifting out bad news, blowing insignificant successes out of all proportion, and nodding along enthusiastically with your worst, most ill-conceived ideas. This creates a dangerous, self-reinforcing echo chamber where fatal decisions go unchallenged, where critical warnings are silenced, and where dissenting voices are systematically eliminated. and the psychological pull of it is immense. It feels incredible to be told you're a genius, that every idea you have is brilliant, that every move you make is perfect. But Machiavelli saw this intoxicating comfort as a slow-acting poison, one that leads directly and inevitably to ruin. Modern research overwhelmingly confirms this ancient insight. One study, for instance, found that CEOs who are flattered into overconfidence, who live in this insulated bubble, consistently make biased, often terrible decisions, precisely because no one around them dares to challenge their assumptions or contradict their pronouncements. The fundamental problem isn't that these leaders are inherently unintelligent, it's that power, by its very nature, naturally shields them from unvarnished truth. They begin, unconsciously, to reward the yes-men who will eventually be the architects of their downfall. Machiavelli's solution was radical then, and it remains radical today. A leader must deliberately, actively create an environment where honest, even brutal, criticism is not just tolerated, but explicitly rewarded, not punished. This demands an incredible degree of psychological security, a profound ego strength. You have to be genuinely willing to put your personal ego, your fragile self-image, on the back burner, subordinating it to the greater good, the survival and thriving of the company. He advised a ruler to pick wise, independent counselors, and to give only them the freedom to speak the truth. And then, only on topics the ruler explicitly asks about, preventing unsolicited flattery. This remains a bedrock principle of truly great modern leadership. The legendary CEO of General Motors, Alfred P. Sloan, was famous for this counterintuitive wisdom. During a meeting where he presented a decision and everyone nodded in agreement, he famously said, "Gentlemen, I take it we are all in complete agreement on the decision here." When everyone nodded in unison, he replied, "Then I propose we postpone further discussion to give ourselves time to develop disagreement and perhaps gain some understanding of what the decision is all about." Sloan instinctively knew that unanimous agreement, achieved without robust debate, was a colossal red flag, a harbinger of unchallenged, flawed thinking. Ray Dalio, the founder of the multi-billion-dollar hedge fund Bridgewater Associates, built his entire company on what he calls radical transparency. Employees are not just allowed, but required, to openly challenge each other's ideas, regardless of rank or seniority. It's a system meticulously designed to systematically destroy the kind of insidious groupthink Machiavelli warned about, ensuring that the best ideas, the most robust strategies, win out, not merely the ideas of the most powerful person in the room. The profound challenge for any leader is to unequivocally prove you won't shoot the messenger. It's not enough to simply declare an open-door policy. You have to demonstrate, through consistent actions, that you genuinely welcome bad news, that you actively seek out challenges to your deeply held assumptions, no matter how uncomfortable. The bottom line from Machiavelli is a fierce call for intellectual honesty, for a relentless, internal war against your own ego and the comforting, deceptive lies of flatterers. To truly succeed, you must aggressively seek the truth, no matter how much it stings. Engrave that in your mind. Principle 5. The pragmatic edge. When the ends justify the means. This leads us to the most morally tangled, most frequently condemned, yet arguably most impactful part of Machiavellian thinking, famously summarized, though never explicitly written by him, in the chilling phrase, "The ends justify the means." While he didn't pen those exact words, his work absolutely captures the underlying sentiment. He argued that, when the act accuses, the result should excuse. In the high-stakes, brutal game of business, this translates to a stark reality. A leader sometimes has to undertake actions that, in a personal or moral context, would be considered ruthless, even reprehensible, to achieve a greater, existential good for the company, for the organization's survival. This is, without a doubt, his most controversial idea, and it walks a perilous tightrope between pragmatic leadership and outright corporate malfeasance. For Machiavelli, this wasn't a license for wanton cruelty. It was a cold, hard recognition that the world of power, whether political or corporate, operates by a different, often harsher, set of rules. A leader who is perpetually bound by conventional morality, by the niceties of personal ethics, will inevitably be crushed by those competitors who are not, by those who are willing to play by power's true, unwritten laws. He wrote that a leader must learn how not to be good and to use this knowledge according to the necessity of the case. This is not a call to evil, but a call to strategic realism. In the cutthroat business world, you witness this principle everywhere. Consider mass layoffs. When a company is staring down the barrel of a crisis, a catastrophic economic downturn, a collapse in market share, or a crippling debt load, laying off thousands of people is a brutal act that causes immense, undeniable human suffering. A leader solely focused on being loved, on maintaining popularity, might delay that agonizing decision, desperately hoping things magically turn around, perhaps at the behest of emotional pleas or external pressure. In doing so, they risk not only delaying the inevitable but effectively killing the entire company, ultimately putting everyone out of a job. A Machiavellian leader understands that the end, the company's survival, the preservation of its core mission, the long-term employment of the remaining workforce, justifies the harsh, immediate means of the layoffs. They would act decisively, make the painful cut, and then aggressively work to rebuild, to ensure continuity. Amazon's early strategy, particularly its relentless pursuit of market dominance, is a perfect, if unsettling, example. In its quest to utterly dominate the online retail market, Amazon deliberately sold books and other products at a massive, unsustainable loss. It was a ruthless, predatory tactic with an explicit, clear end goal: drive smaller, independent competitors out of business, starve them of oxygen. Ethically, it is highly questionable, eliciting widespread criticism from various quarters. But from a purely Machiavellian viewpoint, it was brilliantly effective. The end: achieving a near monopoly, securing an unassailable market position, justified the predatory means, culminating in Amazon's global dominance today. High-stakes negotiations are another arena where this principle plays out with chilling regularity. We often like to imagine negotiation as a win-win scenario, a collaborative effort, but often it is a zero-sum game, a direct contest where one side's gain is another's loss. Studies consistently show that individuals with Machiavellian personality traits often crush it in these situations. They are more willing to deploy calculated deception, to exploit perceived weaknesses, and to leverage information asymmetry to secure a disproportionately better deal. They are not there to make friends or foster goodwill. They are there to win decisively. The psychological key is a kind of profound emotional detachment and a relentless, laser-like focus on strategic results. It requires a leader to surgically separate their personal moral code from the often brutal, amoral, strategic needs of their job. This doesn't inherently make them a psychopath. It makes them a ruthless pragmatist, a player in the game of power. But this is also the most dangerous Machiavellian principle. Without a strong, internalized ethical compass, without clear boundaries, its application can quickly lead to disaster, to public outcry, to regulatory action, or to the irreparable erosion of trust. The key, as Machiavelli himself might advise, is to use these means only when absolutely, strategically necessary, and critically, to always maintain the appearance of virtue. A leader seen as wantonly cruel, as overtly immoral, will quickly lose all support, both internal and external. It's a powerful weapon, but one that can easily backfire, destroying the wielder if not handled with ultimate precision. Engrave this truth into your mind. Power requires pragmatism, but unchecked pragmatism leads to ruin. Principle 6. Harnessing envy and rivalry. Orchestrating ambition. Machiavelli was a keen, almost anthropological observer of people, and he understood with chilling clarity that two of the most powerful, often destructive, engines of human behavior are ambition and envy. He grasped that people are naturally, inherently ambitious, and that this relentless drive inevitably creates conflict, competition, and rivalry within any group dynamic, whether it's a Renaissance court or a modern corporation. A truly smart leader, he argued, doesn't just intellectually acknowledge this fact. They learn how to actively manage, and even more profoundly, how to harness these potent, often negative, forces for their own strategic benefit and the benefit of the organization. In a company, this is the subtle, complex art of managing internal politics. Every office, every department, every C-suite is filled with ambitious individuals fiercely competing for promotions, for scarce resources, for influence, and for recognition. A naive leader might attempt to stamp out all rivalry, to foster a utopian vision of teamwork and pure collaboration. A Machiavellian leader, however, knows that ambition is a powerful engine, a boundless source of energy. The goal isn't to switch it off, which is impossible anyway. The goal is to expertly steer its raw power in a productive, goal-oriented direction, to channel its competitive drive towards organizational objectives. You see this principle expertly applied in how successful companies structure incentives. Smart CEOs create systems of controlled competition, sales leaderboards that publicly display performance bonuses that reward top-tier results, promotion contests that pit individuals or teams against each other. These mechanisms don't eliminate ambition. They channel employees' natural, primal drive into a productive race that ultimately drives superior results for the company. The inherent danger, of course, is that this rivalry can easily turn toxic, devolving into backstabbing, insidious politicking, and the creation of impenetrable silos that hinder collaboration. Machiavelli's advice here was subtle, demanding a psychological acuity from the ruler. He suggested that a leader should keep a close, watchful eye on their top lieutenants, on those directly beneath them. You might, he implied, judiciously encourage a healthy rivalry between two talented executives, forcing them to fiercely compete on performance, pushing each other to excel. But crucially, you also ensure that neither one ever accumulates enough independent power or influence to pose a direct challenge to your ultimate authority. It's a delicate, dangerous balancing act, stoking the fires of ambition just enough to generate exceptional results, but not so much that it incinerates the entire organization. Steve Jobs, once again, was a master of this internal orchestration. He was famous for intentionally pitting teams against each other at Apple, believing it would force them to produce their absolute best work. The legendary rivalry between the Macintosh and Lisa teams is a textbook case study. He fostered intense, almost cutthroat competition, convinced it would push both teams to create revolutionary breakthroughs. While it undeniably caused a tremendous amount of internal friction and personal animosity, it directly led to the Mac's groundbreaking innovations. A truly effective leader also has to be an astute psychologist when it comes to managing envy, the destructive, corrosive flip side of ambition. A ruler who showers excessive favor on one person will inevitably ignite bitter envy in everyone else, creating deep-seated resentment. Therefore, a wise leader meticulously distributes rewards and punishments in a manner that feels consistently fair and merit-based, explicitly not based on personal favoritism or arbitrary whims. They might publicly praise a team's success to inspire others, but they are scrupulously careful not to create a permanent, entrenched class of favorites that breeds animosity and internal division. This principle extends to entire departments within a company: sales versus engineering, marketing versus finance. They all possess their own distinct agendas, their own metrics of success, their own internal cultures. The Machiavellian CEO understands these inherent competing interests and, when necessary, subtly plays them off one another, ensuring that no single department becomes so overwhelmingly powerful as to dictate the entire company's strategic direction, maintaining a centralized control. The profound psychological insight is this: you cannot erase human nature. You cannot simply legislate away ambition or rivalry. A leader who pretends they can, who operates under such a delusion, is a fool. The truly successful leader accepts these darker, inconvenient parts of our psychology and learns to conduct them like a master orchestra, transforming the discordant noise of individual ambition into a powerful, harmonious symphony of corporate success. Remember that. Principle 7. Machiavellianism in the age of AI and data. The Digital Prince. If Machiavelli were alive today, he wouldn't be writing manifestos for princes. He'd be utterly obsessed with Silicon Valley, the tools of power, the capabilities he could only dream of conceptually. Mass surveillance, granular psychological profiling, the ability to influence millions of minds in real time are now just business as usual, fundamental components of modern tech giants. The precise psychological principles he laid out for a 16th-century prince have found their ultimate, terrifying expression in the hands of today's digital titans. Machiavelli instinctively knew that information is power. He explicitly told the prince to be a constant inquirer, to understand every single detail about his territory and his people. Today, companies like Google, Meta, and Amazon are the ultimate constant inquirers, collecting oceans of data on our every click, every search query, every purchase, every casual interaction. This unprecedented volume of data grants them a godlike, almost omniscient view of the public, enabling them to predict human behavior, collective trends, and individual preferences with stunning, almost prescient accuracy. Controlling perception was another of Machiavelli's core, unyielding ideas. He advised a leader to carefully craft their public image, to meticulously control the narrative, to dictate the story. Modern AI-powered marketing is the perfection of this ancient art. Algorithms don't merely sell you a product, they actively sculpt your reality, subtly guiding your thoughts and desires. They meticulously analyze your micro-behaviors, the milliseconds you pause on a photo, the subtle sentiment in your social media posts, to construct an incredibly detailed psychological profile. Then, they feed you hyper-personalized content that feels less like an intrusive advertisement and more like a serendipitous personal discovery, a natural extension of your own thoughts. As Machiavelli might grimly observe, the greatest victory is achieved when your opponent doesn't even realize they've been conquered. The consumer believes they are making a free, autonomous choice, while AI quietly, expertly shapes their decisions, nudging them towards predefined outcomes. Then there's the chilling principle of creating dependency. A prince, Machiavelli wrote, should make himself absolutely essential to his people, to his subjects. This is precisely what today's digital ecosystems masterfully achieve. Apple's meticulously walled garden of integrated services and hardware, Amazon's Prime ecosystem that makes everything instantly accessible, Google's pervasive suite of interconnected applications. They all create a powerful, almost inescapable dependency. The perceived cost and sheer inconvenience of leaving these ecosystems become so prohibitively high that we willingly become subjects in their digital kingdoms, subtly trading our autonomy for their convenience. It could even be argued that some companies implicitly employ what Machiavelli called a manufactured crisis. He observed that deliberately disrupting the status quo, injecting chaos into an existing order, often creates a unique opportunity for a new leader to consolidate power, to emerge as the necessary solution. In tech, this is the entire move fast and break things ethos. By audaciously launching a technology or business model that utterly upends an entire industry, a company creates systemic chaos, and in that chaos, they expertly position themselves as the only viable new order. Uber did this to the entrenched taxi industry. Airbnb did this to traditional hotels. In each case, a manufactured crisis, a deliberate disruption, allowed a new digital prince to ascend the throne, consolidating immense power and influence. The ethical problem here is glaring, undeniable. Rejecting these incredibly powerful AI and data tools purely on moral grounds is noble, perhaps, but in the hyper-competitive, winner-take-all tech world, it is almost certainly corporate suicide. Your rivals, your competitors, will not hesitate for a second. This forces a distinctly Machiavellian choice upon today's leaders. Learn how not to be good, to understand and utilize these morally ambiguous tools, and deploy that knowledge when strategic necessity demands it, or risk getting utterly crushed, relegated to irrelevance. The psychology of influence and control that Machiavelli outlined 500 years ago hasn't fundamentally changed. What has changed, dramatically and terrifyingly, is the scale, the precision, and the terrifying efficiency of the tools now at our disposal. The modern CEO, armed with AI, big data, and pervasive digital networks, has become a digital prince, ruling over an empire of users in ways Machiavelli could only have ever dreamed. We've journeyed through the shadowy corridors of power, from 16th century Italy to the glass-walled boardrooms of today. We've seen how these timeless, and let's be brutally honest, deeply uncomfortable psychological principles are still running the show, dictating outcomes. These ideas are powerful, and like any power, they can be wielded for good or for ill. But understanding them, truly understanding them, is the critical first step to navigating the world as it actually is, not as we naively wish it were. If you found this deep dive into the psychology of power valuable, if you truly felt the shift in your understanding, then do us a favor. Hit that like button. Subscribe for more content that fearlessly decodes the hidden, often unsettling forces shaping our world. And now, for the comments. I want to know, which of these Machiavellian principles do you see most often, most clearly, playing out in your own workplace, in your own industry, right now? Let us know your thoughts below. I will personally pin the most insightful, the most brutally honest comment. So, what's the ultimate bottom line? After dragging Machiavelli's 500-year-old ghost into the 21st century, after stripping away the illusions, we've learned this immutable truth. The fundamental psychology of power is timeless. The operating system of human nature, driven by ambition, by fear, and by relentless self-interest, hasn't had a major update in millennia. It functions today as it did 5 centuries ago. We broke down 7 key principles from this ruthless, pragmatic playbook. Number 1. We saw that being feared is not about cruelty, but about commanding profound, earned respect, backed by clear consequences. Number 2. We learned that a truly great leader must embody both the raw, decisive strength of the lion and the cunning, strategic intelligence of the fox. Number 3. We explored virtu, the relentless, unyielding drive to master your own destiny through decisive action, to impose your will on the unpredictable currents of fortuna. Number 4. We uncovered the insidious poison of the yes-man culture and the absolute, non-negotiable need for leaders to actively, courageously embrace brutal, honest criticism. Number 5. We confronted the messy, morally ambiguous idea that, in the most extreme circumstances, the ends can, and often do, justify the means, especially when corporate survival is at stake. Number 6. We saw how a smart, psychologically astute leader can harness the potent, often destructive forces of ambition and rivalry, channeling them to fuel unprecedented success. Number 7. And finally, we witnessed how all of these ancient principles have been put on terrifying steroids in our modern world of big data, pervasive AI, and global digital ecosystems, creating an unprecedented landscape of control. The enduring lesson of Machiavelli isn't to become a monster, it's a challenge to become a realist. To ignore these fundamental principles is to leave yourself utterly defenseless against those who will not hesitate to use them. By understanding this darker, often uncomfortable side of strategy, we are far better equipped to see it, to defend against it, and perhaps, just perhaps, to use it wisely, with purpose, with a controlled hand, because in the end, power is a game. The only question that truly matters is whether you're a player or merely a pawn. And Machiavelli's enduring, chilling legacy is that he gave us the undeniable rule book for the players.